I flew to St. Barts. Located in the northeastern Caribbean, not far from St. Maarten, the island of St. Barts is an overseas collectivity of France. Much like St. Maarten though, it is another must-visit destination for aviation enthusiasts. The island is served by a relatively small airport, which has a runway that's just over 2,100 feet long. As a result, traffic is limited to smaller planes like Twin Otters and Cessna Caravans. There, however, is a large hill directly in front of the western end of the runway, which makes for an approach that's often dubbed one of the most extreme in the world. Whether on board one of these planes or watching from the ground, a challenging approach like this makes for a genuinely thrilling aviation experience. So, while I was staying in St. Maarten last year, well, this was one day trip that I had to make. As one of the largest airports in this part of the Caribbean, Princess Juliana International Airport serves as a connecting hub for travelers going to nearby islands like St. Barts. One of those airlines that operates these inter-island flights is Dutch Caribbean airline Winair. They operate 2 ATR-42s and a few de Havilland Canada Twin Otters from their base here in St. Maarten. The Twin Otter is the largest plane that regularly flies into St. Barts, and with it being a Canadian-built plane, it and Winair seemed like the most fitting choice for today's adventure. It was pretty quiet in the terminal this morning, which was obviously still in a temporary state while repairs were being finished following the hurricane in 2017. This flight would be one of the first out to St. Barts, which is also one of the most frequently served routes out of here. There is ferry service between the two islands, but the 10-minute flight is usually much more convenient. Plus, there were 0 lineups to worry about at this time of day. Our gate would be in a slightly different waiting area that was tucked away from this main one. On one of the walls here, they had this really nice display of 950 painted fish that were donated to the airport following the hurricane. Now, there wasn't a ton of communication here from Winair, nor were there working screens at this gate, but we eventually hopped onto a bus about 20 minutes behind schedule. From there, it was a short ride over to today's Twin Otter, a then 43-year-old de Havilland Canada DHC-6-300, registered as Papa Juliet Whiskey India India. This plane was first delivered to Bryman Airways of the UK in April of 1980, and then bounced around a few different UK operators until 1990. It flew in Kenya from 1990 until 2011, and has been with Winair since 2012. Now, Winair technically has seat selection when you check in online, but it being a smaller plane, it's not really enforced, so I made sure to get myself up to the very front row. This bulkhead row did not have a ton of space as expected, but it did have a great view out the window, and especially out the front to watch this iconic approach firsthand. Very soon after sitting down, the 2 Pratt & Whitney PT-6s were started up, and here's the departure from St. Maarten off of runway 10. With these gorgeous views of the Dutch side of St. Maarten, we settled in for this brief flight. Heading southeast bound for St. Barts, we flew past Phillipsburg and the stunning colors of the bay there, plus the cruise ship terminal too. This really is a very short flight, and already the island of St. Barts could be seen up ahead. The two airports are about 30 kilometers apart, and it ended up being exactly 9 minutes from wheels up to wheels down. This, unfortunately, did not give me a ton of time to appreciate those views, which at 1500 feet were absolutely stunning. In this bulkhead row though, Winair had the safety card for the twin Otter, an air sickness bag, and this little sign for passengers to pose with. Nice touch. I'd be flying back with Winair later that day, so I'll take a more thorough look at the safety card then. Very soon, the view of St. Barts got much clearer, as did the absurd amount of yachts down below. As you can see, St. Barts is also quite a mountainous island, and as we headed down towards the runway, well, my heart rate did the opposite. Here's the famous arrival into St. Barts, landing over the hill onto runway 10. Well, that was, without a doubt, one of the most fun landings ever. Still buzzing from that approach, I could not wait to see even more of those from the top of that hill. As an overseas collectivity of France, you still go through customs here in St. Barts, which meant another new stamp in my passport. Fittingly, they put that right next to my other overseas collectivity stamp from St. Pierre and Miquelon the previous year. With that, I wanted to take advantage of the morning light and headed east towards the beach side of the airport first. I had one spot in mind that I wanted to try first, which was a short walk along the wooden perimeter fence, and reached said spot right as the previous flight left back to St. Maarten. It is so cool to see just how close you can get to the action here, and this isn't even the famous spot on top of the hill just yet. Still, watching some of these landings from here, and seeing how close their shadows are to the hill, not to mention the tire tracks in the grass, is just insane. Flying into St. Barts does require some special training for pilots, but it is possible to get those certifications privately. I know I would love to fly a Canadian registered plane into here. Walking further down towards the beach, it was unfortunately closed off. Takeoffs going this direction off the runway 28 end are forbidden, but you do occasionally see arrivals on this side, which have to make a sharp turn to line up with the runway over the bay. Today though, the wind was very much favoring the opposite direction, so there wasn't any chance of seeing that. After grabbing a few runway 10 departures, I then stopped again at the terminal to grab some water and made my way up to the top of the hill. Even halfway up, you get such a cool view of the entire airport, and I got a little teaser of what to expect at the top. Finally up here, this was another one of those surreal moments, being here in such a famous location that I'd seen so many times in photos and videos over the years. Right along the extended center line of the runway at the top of the hill are some understandable warning signs. For obvious reasons, I would definitely be staying off to the side. There's a height joke somewhere in there, but I will not be the one to make it. Also on the other side of that roundabout, you can see the Caribbean side of the island too, along with all of those yachts from before. As always, I will have a proper compilation out shortly, but for now, please enjoy this preview of my plane spotting at St. Barts. Well, after a very exciting afternoon here, I can confidently cross this airport off my bucket list. I genuinely had so much fun here. That challenging approach, plus the strong winds, meant no two landings looked the same, and I have huge respect for the pilots who fly into here every day. As the sun moved more over the runway though, I decided to call it a day and headed back to the terminal. The check-in desks are in open air, with lots of lines for all of the different carriers here. I was booked on one of the last flights of the day back to St. Maarten, but since I showed up early, the agent very kindly offered to move me to an earlier flight for no extra charge, which I accepted. Also in the terminal was an upstairs lounge area that was air-conditioned, and I did come here a couple times throughout the day to cool off when there wasn't much happening. There was also a restaurant up there too, where I had a delicious lunch with an even better view. When you're ready to head through, the departures area is here through a one-way door where there was a document check. You couldn't leave this waiting area after that though, and this was pretty much all there was here. Still, it was air-conditioned as well, and had plenty of windows to watch some more action outside. The Twin Otter taking us back to St. Maarten would be another 40-year-old 300 model, registered as Papa Juliet Whiskey India Papa. This one started out in Malaysia with Malaysian Airline System, as it was known back then, and flew with a few other Malaysian operators until 2014. It joined Winair in 2016 under lease from a company called Unity Aviation Canada, and was returned to them in April of 2023. Funny enough, it's now parked pretty close to home for me at Airdrie Airport just north of Calgary. As you can imagine, it does not take too long to turn a Twin Otter around, and boarding soon started for another brief island hopper flight. This time around, I grabbed a seat in the very back row in row 7, which is technically an exit row and had lots of space. Once again, very quickly, the engines were started, and we were heading back to St. Maarten with what was sure to be a very exciting takeoff.
And also take up security stores, clear over your feet down the aisle. Magnus walking as much as hopping out buoyancy for the police. Departing shortly to Praglowski and enjoying all night.
Flying back to St. Maarten was just as brief as the flight over, if not even quicker, thanks to the tailwind. We still had some excellent views, flying even lower at only 1,000 feet. As promised though, here's a better look at the safety card on these Twin Otters. Winair also has an in-flight magazine in some of these seats, but with these quick turns, it's not surprising some seats don't have them. All in all though, this was a fantastic day. St. Barts is such a fascinating airport, and I'm really glad to have spent the day there, seeing as much as I could. Like most of these videos, I could have stayed longer, but was still paying for an all-inclusive back in St. Maarten, so it made sense to keep this to just a day. Still, it is someplace I'm very happy I had the chance to see, and if you find yourself in the area like I did, St. Barts is absolutely a place any aviation enthusiast must visit. Thank you so much for watching this Caribbean Twin Otter adventure, and I will see you next time.